Hello and welcome back to SpriteGuard Plays Protoshift. Once again, warning, this game contains flashing, dizzying, and other intense effects which may be an issue for those who are photosensitive or epileptic. While some of these can be toggled off in the options, player discretion is advised. So yes, I am coming back to Protoshift because after I played it and I did my video, I found myself thinking about it more and kind of realizing that my first impressions, and this is actually kind of why I don't do first impressions videos for the most part, is my first impressions kind of weren't that great. They were good, but they weren't stellar. But then as I thought about it, the game kept coming back to my mind, and at the end of the last video I kind of said that I wasn't really sure that I would be coming back to this, that I didn't find it compelling enough, and that's not really something that I can say right from the start. It's really something that only reveals itself later on. And I found myself thinking about this game, and so I decided to revisit it and play it a little bit more. And I am still struggling to beat even the first level. But as I mentioned in the previous video, beating levels is not really something that is that important to me in this kind of endless, very challenging game. These short, endless games, I think of them as. So what's actually going on here? The world is kind of rotating around us, and we're moving through these gates. And the gates are moving across kind of the pane of the camera. It's like they're moving across a table and the camera is looking down on the table and rotating. And so it has these two different kinds of motion that you actually have to look at, but our cursor is actually fixed with respect to the camera. And so the rotation ends up causing us problems. And it's the dealing with the rotation at the same time that you're dealing with the fairly simple task of just moving through the gates that really creates the challenge, and it gets a lot faster when you get into like level 4, level 5. And I actually, as I've played this more, I can very clearly see when it slows down. I don't know why I was having so much trouble seeing that. My mouse is actually kind of sticking to the surface that I was using, so apologies if there's some extra noise as I put it onto my desk, but you really need to be able to move the mouse freely in order to play this properly. And I'm finding that kind of the same thing applies in this game that applies in a lot of dodge-em-ups. Not sure why I crashed there. I must have lost my shield right as I hit that wall. But, yeah, in a lot of dodge-em-ups I have noticed that you really want to move as little as possible. And that was something that took me a very long time to realize, and I actually had to see one of my friends who's very good at dodge-em-ups playing it, and I was like, oh, you're not moving hardly at all. I was like constantly moving trying to dodge things. But no, the best thing to do is actually to move the least amount that you need to move in order to get to the next gap. Whoops! But sometimes you have to make bigger motions, and I think that's where this game really becomes taxing, is when you have to make a really big jump while this camera is rotating and you are kind of trying to weave your way through these gates. And so it has a lot of the same motions in it that I'm used to in more conventional dodge-em-ups, but with this novel way of presenting it that I actually really like, and has this really nice, smooth feeling that kind of reminds me of a lot of the other games that I like, and kind of reminds me of the game that I'm working on, though it's completely different. The game that I'm working on is not anything to do with dodging and is in 3D. But there's that kind of, that sense of smoothness between them that I really like. And so, you know, I said that I didn't think that I would be thinking about this game in the future. Turns out I was thinking about this game in the future. I said that I didn't know whether or not I'd come back to it. It does seem like something that I'm coming back to, and it seems like something where there's a lot of room for learning and getting better, and there's actually a lot compelling about it. And so, you know, I said that it didn't seem that compelling. Well, now it does. And I think that there's still, I do feel like there's still something missing that would make it a really long-term love game. It feels a little too simple to be more than like a Super Hexagon, which I know that some people really love Super Hexagon and like really get really far into it. These kinds of games never really stick with me. And so I am cautiously optimistic here. I don't, you know, there's a history that says probably I won't be playing this for a really long time, but it's going to stay in my library, and it's going to be something that I am aware of as a game that I may want to play in the near future, or the distant future. One thing that I actually really notice about myself that took me a lot of kind of painful lessons to realize is that sometimes I will come back to things after many years. And so I had this reed organ that I played for a long time, and I did some work on it, and I was trying to fix it up and tune it a little bit, and I kind of lost interest in it for a while, and my parents were like, well, it looks like garbage now. I was like, well, I'm not that interested in it right now, so I guess it is. But, you know, a few years later, I was like, man, I wish I'd kept that organ, because I started, you know, becoming interested in playing it again, and I didn't have that available to me. So I'm now much more cautious about discarding things, and I'm much more open to say, it's possible that I will return to this. And I know that I'm going to be returning to this in the short term. I know that over the next few weeks, this game is going to keep me entertained for a while. So that is, you know, a really solid endorsement, but I think that it's kind of almost a bigger endorsement to say, and I could see myself returning to it even in the long term. But I feel like it's like I so badly want this game to be a game that I feel like I will continue returning to constantly. And I don't think every game needs to be that. I think that Hyper Rogue and games like that are really miracles when they happen. There's so few games that I feel so compelled to return to in that kind of constant long-term way. And there've just been, you know, one or two games at a time, and then those even will eventually fade. Like, I've played like 200 hours of Skyrim, and I don't play Skyrim anymore. It stopped calling out to me. I still think it's a great game. I still think that it's incredibly good. I think there's so much I like about it, but it has stopped being something that calls out to me. And some games, you know, will last 200 hours before they stop calling out to me. Some games will last 9 hours, and I think that they're all very valuable. Part of the problem that I'm running into here is just I don't have a very big desk, and so I'm running out of room to move my mouse. And so when we have those big jumps, I can actually hit the end of my desk. Especially if we have a lot of jumps in the same direction. And there's not really enough time to actually lift my mouse up and move it. So we're actually making a very good time here. I thought maybe if I went off screen I could kind of cheese it, but I ended up crashing anyway. So yeah, things get very kind of crazy fast once you get a little bit further into it, but I find that my concentration falters a little bit going through these kind of easier parts. And that's something that I have always known about myself, is that it's the easy bits that make my concentration falter. And so Hyper Rogue is actually someplace where I really struggle with that, because I will stop paying attention, and that's one of those games where it'll be very easy for a while and then very quickly become very difficult. And if I'm not prepared for that, if my concentration is not already up, I will not be able to get it up in time. And that's kind of a problem that I'm finding myself running into with this game as well. And so I don't know if I will ever make it the minute and a half that I need to make in order to unlock the later levels, just because I find that my concentration falters early on in most of the runs I do, and so it's very few runs that actually make it to the part that I find really interesting, which is this part. And so I don't get to practice this part very much, and this part is the part that I find really challenging. And so I just don't see a lot of opportunities to make it to the minute and a half mark, and to develop the skills that I'm going to need in order to make it to the minute and a half mark. Because around the minute 20 mark, there's a paradigm shift that I don't have any preparation for, and don't have any way to prepare. And so that kind of is why, that really gets to kind of the heart of why I dislike unlock systems, because I feel like the way that my personal psychology works is incompatible with unlock systems. But I also know at the same time that my own, not sure how to describe it, my own psychology actually does follow a lot of the same psychology that other people have. I'm not 100% an exception to everything. I just have this kind of unusual quirk that makes me really dislike unlock systems, and I know that I also have some quirks that actually make me do a lot of the same things that make people put unlock systems in their game in the first place. And that includes both kind of going after those kind of Skinnerian rewards, and also kind of the sense of trying to jump in and bite off more than I can chew. And so I know that it's a really difficult problem that game designers face, but in this case it has ended up working out in a way that I find really frustrating. But that said, you know, my impression of this game is really positive. It was fairly positive in the previous, even if I didn't do the greatest job of explaining that, and it has only grown, and so I definitely recommend checking this out. Go give them a vote on Greenlight. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.